Welcome back to The Ultimate Road. From the jungle to the plains, we're moving on to the next game we're covering, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. A game that's popularity puts the word legend in The Legend of Zelda. As with all the games on this series, this game has escaped me for quite a while. I had the GBA port of the game, but never beat it or got very far for whatever reason. I've had a lot of opportunities to play it, but for whatever reason, I never felt the desire to. And maybe I'm jumping the gun a bit here, but I probably should have played Majora's Mask instead. Okay, put the pitchforks away and let me explain myself. I know that this game has a huge fan base for a reason. And fair enough. It's popular, so it must be popular for a reason, right? At least let me finish what I want to say. First of all, let's contextualize all my complaints. Link to the Past was released in America in 1992 for the SNES. It, next to Super Metroid, Super Mario World, and Mega Man X, is considered one of the best SNES games, if not just one of the best games, period. That's quite the big reputation. This game, especially in recent years, has been touted as being the gold standard of not only 2D Zelda, but just Zelda in general. Now imagine me playing it for the first time in 2018. I'm expecting something huge, grand, fascinating, marvelous. Something that should blow every other Zelda experience I've had out of the water. I'm sorry, I just don't see it. I think maybe its legendary status just raised my expectations way too high. Maybe it's just because I didn't grow up with the game, but let's just get into it. Compared to the plot of the previous two Zelda games, Link to the Past is an odyssey. Now, it's not Skyward Sword levels of story, but it's got some meat on its bones by this era's standards. Link to the Past takes place in the Downfall timeline after Ocarina of Time, in a sequence of events where Link bites the dust in the final battle. Regardless, the Seven Sages are still able to steal Ganon into the Evil Realm, but not before Ganon nabs the completed Triforce and turns the Sacred Realm into the Dark World. A couple of hundred years later, and an evil prince named Aghanim appears, and ransacks Hyrule Castle, murders the king in cold blood, and brings Zelda down to the dungeon. Link, who's sleeping in his house, receives a message from Zelda, I guess via telepathy or something, which is an ability that she only ever has here, Ocarina, and Breath of the Wild. Fucking inconsistent. Either way, Link gets up, decides the rain can't do shit to stop him, and goes to the castle. He finds his uncle, who promptly dies, he inherits his sword, saves Zelda, makes his way to the sanctuary, and is told his destiny by Mr. Priest here. He tells you that to defeat the evil that threatens the land, you will need the Master Sword, and the first step on the quest is to find the old man, Caesar Salad. To keep this brief, you go to Kakariko and are told to go all the way to the east of Hyrule to find Caesar Salad. You find him, and he tells you to collect the pendants of courage, wisdom, and power. And there you have it. Off you go. Defeat 3 dungeons, pull the Master Sword, go beat Aga Banana, and find yourself in the Dark World where you beat even more dungeons, then use all your required skills to finally beat Ganon. Keeping this brief because really there's not that much to go over by today's standards. There's no twists or turns other than finding out that Agooga is actually Ganon, but that's about it. Straight to the point and it gets the job done. This really seems to be a running trend with the games we've been playing. We'll get there eventually. I'm not going to rag on the game for being overly simple with its story though. Plus, for as far as games released around its time to go within its genre, this is a goddamn omnibus. The scope of this type of story really wasn't fully realized until Twilight Princess, which, if you ask me, is the pinnacle of how this specific style of progression was handled. They did what they could with what they had though, and that's admirable. What's less than admirable though is Hyrule itself. Jesus Christ, what pinhead designed this layout? You open this map and are met with what appears to be this huge sprawling expanse of land. Everything seems so far and spread out, and let me be frank, it's really not. If you took out all the jank you have to navigate in this game to get from point A to point B, it would be a cinch to get there. But no, you have to go around a bunch of bullshit to go to places. It's frustrating to go from one area to another because you'll be taking pot shot after pot shot getting there, having to navigate this goddamn labyrinth of a Hyrule field. After a while, it gets goddamn infuriating. Sure, having the Pegasus boots mitigated the frustration a bit, but it still was a freaking chore before I finally got the ability to warp between areas using this bird. Which, admittedly, was a really cool idea for warping. That was fun. On top of being labyrinthine, it's also pretty barren. There's hardly anybody to shoot the shit with. There's people around Kakariko, and if you want to pay Caesar Salad a visit, he's probably always willing to chat. Guy probably doesn't get too many visitors, as is. And the Dark World fares even worse. Everyone there is a goddamn enemy. You're telling me that the entire Kingdom of Hyrule consists of a grand total population of about 34? They're damn right calling this the Downfall timeline. There's nobody fucking here. One of my favorite parts of the downtime between dungeons and other Zelda games is talking to the NPCs and just learning more about the areas I've visited. But all these areas I'm visiting are filled with nothing but enemies, and I'm pretty sure this Hinox isn't interested in telling me anything interesting about the Pyramid of Power. As you may have guessed, I'm not exactly a fan of the world building, or really just the world itself presented in this game. It just feels underdeveloped. A few more towns or just NPCs in general to talk to would have mitigated the game feeling so unpopulated. At least the world itself is pretty to look at. Colors are all placed appropriately, sprite quality is up to snuff, not bad, but I'm not exactly a fan of Link's sprite. What the fuck is going on with him? His hat and his tunic are two different colors, his belt is gold, and he just in general looks extremely doofy. To make matters worse, if I weren't playing a very slightly modified version of the game, his fucking hair would be pink. Pink! The fuck? Now apparently this is because of him and his bunny counterpart sharing a color palette, but they really couldn't have used the brown from his sleeves or something instead of making Link's hair pink? Why'd the bunny specifically have to be pink? This looks terrible! In fact, I'm not really a fan of a lot of the design in this game. I don't know, the game style looks awkward. It's not bad per se, it just feels like this awkward mix of Western Dungeons & Dragons and an early 90s chibi anime look. Environments, however, look just fine, dungeons notwithstanding. Not that they look outright terrible or anything, they just don't really stand out too much from one another. They're all themed just fine, you can tell what each dungeon is supposed to mean for the area they're in, but they all just feel like slight retoolings of the same dungeon tile set. Like, the only thing separating each dungeon from one another is what the floor tiles and wall objects look like. It really makes the dungeons meld and smoosh together visually, with the exception of the Ice Palace, but that's mostly due to it using more bright coloring than the rest of the game could get away with. Who knows, maybe I'm just spoiled by what's possible with more advanced tech, but I just prefer something like an ice area being a cavern or something, rather than just a giant building made of ice. Something to that idea, you know? The music for each dungeon is also the same theme for every light and dark world dungeon, which gets pretty annoying to listen to every single damn dungeon. It really doesn't do much to set apart the dungeons any further. Now, I need to bring this up real quick because I know if I don't, I'll be reminded in the comments. I am aware, Link to the Past completely filled up its cartridge in terms of memory. I am fully aware, but I'm just speaking from my heart. I know why things are the way they are, I'm just stating my piece. They could have waited for the technology to advance a little bit, maybe that would have helped, but who knows. All I know is that the dungeons don't really do it for me in the terms of looks. Gameplay is a bit of a mixed bag. Getting new upgrades and items is always a blast, and it constantly feels like I'm growing in terms of arsenal and stats. That's fun and enjoyable, very much like Mega Man X in that regard. But unlike Mega Man X, I never really felt like I was getting any better at things like combat in this game, which feels extremely stiff and awkward. Combat basically consists of maneuvering around, hoping to maybe land a hit on your opponent without them running into you. I personally never felt like a lot of the hits in the game were from me sucking, but more from me not really having the necessary moveset to combat my foe. Combat became so much of a chore near the end that I just ended up spamming medallion item crashes on my foes just to clear the room so I didn't have to deal with it. It's just really not fun. On top of it all, I want to quickly point out that Link only faces 4 directions, which means you can only use your sword in 4 directions, your bow in 4 directions, throw bombs in 4 directions, and etc. I feel this actually ruined the combat for me entirely because it was unfair for certain enemies to literally be faster than me, shoot in all directions, or just in general fuck me over. If Link could face all directions, I don't think I would have had as nearly a bad of time as I did. Sure, it's quick, but it's nowhere near as engaging as the 3D Zelda games, which turned enemy encounters into a puzzle in it of itself. Combat was about figuring out your opponent's weaknesses and openings, and learning to exploit that. Even in its most primitive form on the N64, the combat was handled much better. Sure, the battles were slower when they were one-on-one, like with Stalfos or Iron Knuckles, but there were less enemies to compensate. Whenever I take hits in a 3D Zelda game, I feel like it's my fault. That's my point. This is less a problem I have with Link to the Past, and more a problem I have with 2D Zelda in general. Maybe comparing 2D and 3D Zelda is stupid to begin with. They handle the same formula in vastly different ways. Whether or not it is, though, Link to the Past simply doesn't handle combat in a way I find very fun. I find it frustrating and would rather just avoid combat to get a move on. Why not talk about something that every Zelda game does right in one area or another, and that's the items. Link's got some deep pockets, and what does this game give him to stuff those mallet space portals in his tunic with? Well, to be frank, just like any Zelda game, they're pretty hit or miss. You have stuff that ranges from as useless as the magic hammer to as useful and cool as the hookshot. Seriously, when has the hookshot been bad? It's freaking amazing no matter what game it's in. How the items are sometimes handled, though, doesn't rub me the right way. Let's talk about the ice rod for a moment, and tie this back to the dungeon design. My first time through, I played the majority of the game and got up to the boss of Turtle Rock, Trinex. This boss requires you to have the ice rod to beat it. Where is the ice rod, might I add? All the way back in the light world. In a random cave that I had no knowledge of. Nobody told me to get the ice rod unless I missed one of Sasha Sursa's Caesar Salad's stupid wall Cheez-Its in the dungeon saying, "Hey, dumbass, I hope you brought some ice cubes for this asshole." I get it, nowadays this is common knowledge, but I had no clue about this thing. Why would I think to go get this when I had no knowledge of it? Not to mention, there's dungeons that require you to get the medallions, which, had I not been told, I would have never even known about to begin with. The only other time I remember this being even remotely performed again in another Zelda game is in Ocarina of Time, when you have to have Din's Fire to enter the Shadow Temple. But at the very least in that game, you're told to go to the top of Death Mountain, where the Great Fairy tells you to go meet her sister to give you Din's Fire. At the very least, the game tells you. But here, nothing. What the hell is that? I'll be honest, I don't like comparing Link to the Past with Ocarina of Time. To me, the two are very different games that handle one formula in two different ways. It feels unfair to compare the two for either game, because they excel at different things. But to make my points for this game, it feels necessary to compare them because, god damn it, everyone else does, and I know that if I don't, someone else will as a retort, so I may as well contextualize my arguments. To tell the truth, I had a very similar situation with this game that I did with Ocarina of Time. I grew up being told that Ocarina of Time was this masterpiece of a game, but when I finally played it, I felt very unimpressed. Let down, even. But after playing this game, I think I'm starting to appreciate Ocarina a little more. The world is more populated, the combat is more fun, and the dungeons are more unique. The field still sucks, they didn't get that right until Twilight Princess in my mind. The story also seemed a little more ambitious, with a few more twists and turns, but again, if given the choice, I feel like Link to the Past would be better suited to be compared to games that came after it that mimicked its style, like Minish Cap and Link Between Worlds. To be honest, I'm really disappointed that I didn't end up liking this game more. It feels really sucky that what's supposed to be the high point that the series could never live up to again feels more like the awkward first attempt that tried its hardest, but really could use fine-tuning. At the very least, it did get fine-tuning in the end. I'll happily play Link Between Worlds over the game that inspired it any day. That game has what this game lacked, and something that drastically improved the gameplay in my mind. The ability to use your sword in any direction. You'd be surprised how much more fun that makes the combat. In the end, I can see why a lot of people like it. It's just not for me. It's not really a game I think I'll find myself returning to anytime soon. I think I need a break from the fantasy setting. And it's prime time for everyone's favorite space bounty hunter to take center stage. Next time on the Ultimate Road, I'll be tackling Metroid Prime. See you next mission.